Shiver in the Pines by Manly Wade Wellman. Who fears the devil, says Jane unto Jim. Who fears the devil, says Jim unto Joan. Who fears the devil, says Joan unto John. Not I, says John all alone. From a game song, once popular with Southern children. Then I wasn't alone. Reckoning I had that woodsy place all to myself, I began to prick Pretty Sorrow on my guitar's silver strings for company. But then I wasn't alone, for soft, fluty music began to play along with me. Looking up sharp, I saw him through the green laurels right in front. He was young. He hadn't a shirt on. Nary razor had touched his soft, yellowy young beard. To his mouth he held a sort of hollowed-out twig, and his slim fingers danced on and off a line of holes to make the notes. Playing, he smiled at me. I smiled back and started the ring that has no end. Right away, quick, he was playing that with me, too. Soft and sweet and high, but not shrill. He wants to be friends, I told myself, and got up and held my hand out to him. He whirled around and ran. Just for a second before he was gone, I saw that he was a man, only to his waist. Below that, he had the legs of a horse. 4 of them. Shiver in the Pines. We sat along the edge of Mr. Hodge Cowan's porch, up the high hills of the Rebel Creek country. Mr. Hodge himself and his neighbor, Mr. Eddie Heron, who was a widow man like Mr. Hodge, and Mr. Eddie's son, Clay, who was a long, tall fellow like his daddy, and Mr. Hodge's pretty cheeked daughter, Sarah Ann, who was a-courting with Clay those days. Those folks and me. I'd stopped off to help Mr. Hodge to build him a new pole fence on my way to Flournoy College to sing to him there. But nothing would do, Mr. Hodge, but that I'd stay 2-3 days till Clay and Sarah Ann's wedding. Supper had been pork and fried apples and pone and snap beans. The sun made to set, and they all asked me to sing. So I picked the silver strings on my guitar and began with an old tuneful one. Choose your partner as you go, choose your partner as you go. Yippee-hoo, howled old Mr. Eddie. You sure enough chose out my favorite best, John. Come on, young folks, choose partners and dance. Up hopped Clay and Sarah Ann, where the front yard was stomped hard and level, and I played it up loud and sang, and Mr. Eddie called the figures for him to step to. Honor your partner, swing your partner, do-si-do, Allemande right. Till I got to one last chorus, singing it out for all I could. Fare thee well, my charming girl, fare thee well, I'm gone. Fare thee well, my charming girl, with golden slippers on. Kiss your partner and turn loose of her, hollowed out Mr. Eddie as I stopped. And Clay kissed Sarah Ann the way he'd think it was his whole business in life. And Sarah Ann, rising up on her little toes, kissed him back. Mr. Hodge picked up the jug that had his make of whiskey in it, and there never was government whiskey as good as what Mr. Hodge knows how to make for his own drinking and his friends'. Won't be singing and dancing to touch that on the day these young ones marry up, he said, passing the jug to me. And no fare thee wells, neither. And I purely wish I could buy you golden slippers, Sarah Ann, said Clay as they sat down together. Gold's where you find it, quoted Mr. Eddy from the Bible, and took a wet out of the jug in his turn. Clay, you might could ransack round them old lost mines the ancients dug that nobody knows much about. Remember the song about them, John? I remembered it. For Mr. Eddy and Mr. Hodge talked right much about the ancients in their mines. I sang it. Where were they? Where were they? On that gone and vanished day, when they shoveled for their treasure of gold. In the pines, where the sun never shines, and I shiver when the wind blows cold. As I stopped, a fellow coughed. Odd, said the fellow walking into the yard, to hear that song just now. We didn't know him. He was blocky made, not young, nor either old, with a store suit and a black hat, like a man run for superior court judge. His square face looked flat and white, like a face drawn on paper. Might I sit for a minute? He asked mannerly. I've come a long, long way. Take a place on this door log and welcome, Mr. Hodge invited him. My name's Hodge Cowan, and this here's my girl, Sarah Ann, and these is the Herons, and this here's John, who's a-visiting with me. Come a long way, he said. Where from, sir? From going to and fro in the world, said the stranger, lifting the black hat from his smoky gray hair, and from walking up and down in it. That was another quotation from the Bible, and if you've read the first chapter of the book of Job, you'll know who's supposed to have said it. The man saw how he got, for he smiled as he sat down and stuck out his dusty shoes. My name's Reed Barnett, he told us. Odd to hear the talk of the ancients and their mines, because I've been roving around to hear the talk about 'em. Said Mr. Hodge. The tale goes that the ancients come into these here mountains back before the settlers. Close to 400 years back. That long, Mr. Hodge? Asked the young Clay. Well now, Mr. Hodge allowed. There was a tree cut that had growed up in the mouth of the mine of the ancients near Horse Stomp, and there was school folks that counted the rings in the wood, and there was full 300. It was before the Yankee War that they'd done that counting, so the tree seated itself in the mine hole about 400 years back, or maybe before that. The time of the Spaniards, nodded Reed Barnett. Maybe about when Hernando de Soto and his Spanish soldiers came across these mountains. I've always heard tell that the ancients was living here around that time, put in Mr. Eddy. But I've likewise heard tell they wasn't no Spanish folks, nor neither Indians. Did they get what they were after? Wondered Reed Barnett. My old daddy went into that horse stomp heading once, said Mr. Eddy. He said it run back about 700 feet as he stepped, and at the end a deep shaft went down. Well, he reckoned no mortal soul would ever dig so far, excusing he found what he was after. He pushed Mr. Hodge's jug toward Reed Barnett. Have a dram? Thank you kindly. I don't use it. But what did the ancients want? Only mine of theirs I seen is over the ridge yonder, Mr. Hodge nodded through the dark. Where they call it Black Pine Hollow. Where the sun never shines, put in Reed Barnett, smiling tight at me, and I shiver when the wind blows cold. I was there 3-4 times when I was a chap, said Mr. Hodge, but not lately. Folks allows there's haints there. I seen a right much quartz laying round, and I hear gold comes from quartz rock. Gold, nodded Reed Barnett, his hand inside his coat. You folks treat me clever and friendly, and I hope you'll let me make a gift. Miss Sarah Ann, I myself don't have use for these, so if you'd accept. What he held out was golden slippers that shone in the sun's last bit of light. Gentlemen, you should have heard Sarah Ann crying out in her pleasure. You should have seen the gold shine in her eyes. But she drew back the hand she put out. It wouldn't be fitting for me to take them, she said. Then I'll just give them to this young man. And Reed Barnett set the slippers in Clay's lap. Young sir, I missed out if Miss Sarah Ann would refuse a gift at your hands. The slippers had slim high heels and pointy toes, and they shone like glory. Clay smiled to Sarah Ann and held them out. To see her smile back, you'd think it was Clay, and not Reed Barnett, who'd taken them from nowhere for her. I do thank you kindly, said Sarah Ann. She shucked off scuffy old shoes, and the golden slippers fitted her like slippers made to the measure of her little feet. John, she said, you were just singing about things like this. Heard him as I come up trail from Rebel Creek, said Reed Barnett. And likewise, I heard him sing of the ancients in Black Pine Hollow. His square face looked at us all around. Gentlemen, I wonder if there's heart in y'all to go there with me. We gawped again. Finally, Clay asked, For gold? For what else? Said Reed Barnett. Nobody's found it there because nobody had the right way of looking for it. Nary one of us was really surprised to hear what the man said. There had been such a story as long as anybody had lived around Rebel Creek. Mr. Hodge drank from the jug and said, In what respect a special way, Mr. Barnett? I said I've roved a fair piece. I want to fetch a spell that would show the treachery. But I can't do it all alone. Again, the white face traveled its look over us. It takes 5 folks, men, because a woman mustn't go into a mine. We knew about that. If lady folks go down a mine, there'll be a miner killed, or something else bad to befall. You've treated me friendly, said Reed Barnett again. I feel like asking you. Will y'all come help me? Mr. Cowan and Mr. Heron, and you his son, and you John. 5 would seek the treasure of the ancients. 5 ways we'd divide it. Sarah Ann had her manners with her. I'll go do the dishes, she said to us. No, Clay. Stay and talk here. Reed Barnett watched her walk into the house. She left the door open, and the shine from the hearth gave us a red light out there after sundown. You're a lucky young rooster, Reed Barnett said to Clay. A 5th chunk of the ancient's treasure would sure enough be a blessing to that girl. Mr. Barnett, I'm with you, Clay quickly told him. So am I, said Mr. Eddy, because his son had spoken. I don't lag back when others go forward, I added on. And count on me, finished Mr. Hodge for us. That makes 5. Like what you wanted, sir. But you studied the matter out and got the spell. You should ought to have more than a 5th of whatever we find. But the square white face shook sideways. No, part of the spell is that each of the 5 takes his equal part of the doing and of the sharing. That's how it must be to come true. Now, we begin. "This instant?" asked Clay. "Nary better time than now," said Reed Barnett. "Stand round, y'all." He got up from the door log and stepped into the yard, and the three of us with him. "The first part of the spell," he said, "to learn if the ancients truly left a treasure." Where the hearth's red glimmer came out on the ground in front of the door, he bent down. He picked up a stick and marked it in the dirt. "Five-pointed star," he said. It was maybe 4 feet across. "Stand at the points, friends. Yeah. Like that." Rising, he stood at the 5th point. He dropped the stick and put a white hand into the side pocket of his coat. "Silence," he bade us, though he didn't need to. He stooped again and flung something down at the star's center. Maybe it was a handful of powder, though I'm not sure, for it broke out into fire quick and shone like pure white heat, yanked in a chunk from the heart of a furnace. It shone on the gray beards of Mr. Hodge and Mr. Eddy. Clay's young jaws and cheeks looked dull and drawn. Reed Barnett needed no special light to be pale. He began to speak. "Moloch, Lucifer," he said in a voice like praying, "Anector, Samiator, sleep ye not, awake, the strong hero, Holoba, the powerful, Ishiros, the mighty, Manus Erohi, show us the truth. Amen." Again, his hand in his pocket, to bring out a slip of paper the size of a postcard and whiter than the white of the glow, he handed it to Clay, who was nearest to him. "Breathe on it," said Reed Barnett, "and the others do likewise." Clay breathed on it and passed it to Mr. Hodge. Then it came to me and to Mr. Eddy and back to Reed Barnett. He held it low above that sick white heat. Back he jumped, quick, and yelled out, "Earth on the fire! Smother it before we lose the true word!" Clay and his father kicked on the dirt. Mr. Hodge and Reed Barnett walked side by side to the porch, whispering together. Then Mr. Hodge called in to Sarah Ann, "Fetch out the lamp, honey." She did so. We gathered around to look at the paper. Writing was on it, the way you'd think it was written in mud instead of ink. Reed Barnett gave it to Sarah Ann. "Your heart's pure," he said. "Read out what it says." She held the lamp in one hand, the paper in the other. "Do right and prosper," she read, soft and shaky. "And what you seek is yours. Great treasure. Obey orders. To open the way, burn the light." "We put out the light," said Clay, but Reed Barnett waved him quiet. "Turn the paper over, Miss Sarah Ann," said Reed Barnett. "Looks to be more to read on the other side." She went back on from more muddy-looking scrawl on the back. "Aram Harnum has the light. Buy it from him, but don't tell him why. He is wicked. Pay what he asks. The power is dear and scarce." She looked up. "That's all it says," she told us, and gave the paper back to Reed Barnett. We all sat down, the lamp on his porch floor. "Anybody know that man, what's his name?" asked Reed Barnett. "We know Aram Harnum," answered Mr. Hodge. What folks along Rebel Creek said about Aram Harnum wasn't good. Once he went to college to study to be a preacher, and that college gave him a trial, preaching a sermon to some folks in another county. His teachers wanted to hear. When it done, as I've heard it told, those teachers told Aram Harnham that from what he had said under the pretense of a sermon, they wanted him to pack his things and leave that college before another sun rose. I take it Aram Harnham's a bad man, Reed Barnett suggested. You take it right, sir, allowed Mr. Eddy. So does whoever wrote it on that there paper. Wrote on the paper? Reed Barnett repeated to him and held it to the light. It was white and empty. So was the other side when he turned that up. The writing's vanished, he said, nodding his pale face above it. But we all remember what it said. We must buy the light and not let Aram Harnham know why we want it. When we go see him? Asked Mr. Hodge. Why not right now? Said Reed Barnett. But Mr. Hodge and Mr. Eddy spoke against that. Neither one of them wanted to be a-trucking around Aram Harnham's place in the dark of night. We made it up we'd meet tomorrow morning for breakfast at Mr. Eddy's, and then go. Mr. Eddy and Clay left. Mr. Hodge and Sarah Ann made up pallets for Reed Barnett, and me just inside the front door. Reed Barnett slept right off quick, but I lay awake a good spell of the time. There was a sight of hoot owls a-hooting in the trees round about the cabin, and a sight of thoughts in my head. The way I've told it so far, you might could wonder why we came in so quick on Reed Barnett's spell and scheme. Lying there, I wondered the same thing. It came to mind that Clay had first said he'd join. That was for Sarah Ann, and the hope to make her happy. After Clay spoke, Mr. Eddy and Mr. Hodge felt bound to do the same, for with them, the kingdom and the power and the glory tied up to their young ones, and they wanted to see them wed and happy. Mr. Hodge in special. He worked hard on his little place, with corn patches on terraces up slopes where you hung on with one hand while you chopped weeds with the other, and just one cow and 2 hogs in his pens. I reckon that hope, more than belief, caused them to say yes to Reed Barnett. As for me, I'd gone a many a miles and seen a right much more than any of my friends, and some of the things, not what you call everyday things. I hope for a good piece of luck for Clay and Sarah Ann. Never having had aught myself or expecting to or needing to. I anyhow saw he and she wanted something, and maybe with 1 or 2 things I'd watched happen I could know how to help out more than either of their fathers. Figuring that way, I slept at last, and we all got up soon in the morning to meet at Mr. Eddy's and to go to Aram Harnham's. Seeing Aram Harnham sitting in front of his squatty-built little cabin, I reckon I'd never seen such a hairier man and mighty few hairier creatures. He had a juniper bark basket betwixt his patched knees, and he was picking over a mess of narrow-leafed plants in it. His hands crawled in the basket like black furry spiders. Out betwixt his shaggy black hair and shaggy black beard looked only his bright eyes and his thin nose, and if he smiled or frowned at us, none could say. He spoke up with a boom, and I recollected how he'd once studied to be a preacher. "Hodge Cowan," he said, "you're welcome, and your friends too. I knowed yous was coming." "Who done told you that?" asked Mr. Hodge. "Little bird done told me," said Aram Harnham. "Little black bird with green eyes that tells me a many thing." That minded me of the ugly bird that once I'd killed to free a whole valley of folks from the scare of it. "Did your little bird tell you what we want?" asked Mr. Eddy. but Aram Harnham shook his hairy head. "No, sir. Never said what." He put down the basket. "So I'm waiting to hear what." "We want a light of you, Aram Harnham," said Mr. Hodge then. "A special kind of light. The light that shows you what you'd miss else?" Aram Harnham leaned back against his cabin logs. "I can fix you such a light." "How much?" asked Clay. Aram Harnham's furry hand fiddled in his black beard. "It's a scarce thing, that light. Cost you $500. $500! howled out Mr. Eddy. The eyes among Aram Harnham's hair came to me. "Hear that echo, son?" he asked. "These here hills and mountains sure enough give you back echoes." "Yes, sir, Mr. Eddy." $500. Mr. Hodge gulped. "We ain't got no such kind of money." "Gotta have that kind of money to buy that kind of light," said Aram Harnham. "Step aside with me, friend," said Reed Barnett, and Aram Harnham sat and watched us pull a dozen or 20 steps back to talk with our heads together. "He guesses something," Reed Barnett whispered, "but not everything, or I judge he'd put his price higher still. Anyway, our spell last night said there's treasure, and we need the light to find it." "I ain't got but $40, said Mr. Eddy. "Any young's got enough to put with my 40 to make 500? "20's all I got," Reed Barnett said, and breathed long and worried. "That's 60 so far." "John?" "The change in my pockets maybe comes to $1, I said. "I'm not certain sure." Aram Harnham laughed or coughed once. "You'll sure enough make a big thing out of $500, he called to us. Mr. Hodge faced around. "We don't have that much cash." "I might could credit you," Hodge cowaned. $500 worth?" asked Mr. Hodge. "What on?" "Well..." The word came out slow out of the hair and whiskers. "You got a piece of land, and a cow, and a pig or two." "I can't give you them," Mr. Hodge said. "You can put 'em up. And Mr. Eddy could put up his place too." "Them two places is worth plenty more than just $500, Mr. Eddy started in to argue. "Not on the textbooks, the way I hear it tell from my little green-eyed bird." Reed Barnett beckoned us around him again. "Can't we raise it somehow?" he whispered. "We're just before finding a fortune." Mr. Hodge and Mr. Eddy said nothing. "Friends, we've as good as got that ancient's treasure," Reed Barnett said, and rummaged out money from his pocket, a wadded 10, a 5, and some ones. "I'd risk my last cent and take it back off the top of whatever we find. You others can do the same." Mr. Hodge and Mr. Eddy mumbled together for a while, and we others watched. Then they turned, both of them, and went out to Aram Harnham. "We'll want a guarantee," said Mr. Hodge. "Guarantee," Aram Harnham repeated to him. "Oh, I'll guarantee you the light. I'll put it down in writing that it'll show you to what you seek." "Draw us up some loan papers," said Mr. Eddy, sharp and deep. $250 loaned to each of us against our places, and a guarantee the light will work in 60 days of time to pay you back." Aram Harnham looked at him, then went into the cabin. He fetched out a tablet of paper and an ink bottle and an old stump of a pen. He wrote out 2 pages, and Mr. Hodge and Mr. Eddy read 'em over and signed their names. Then, Aram Harnham bade us to wait. He went back inside. What he did in yonder took time, and I watched part of it through the door. He mixed stuff in a pot. I thought I smelt sulphur burning, and once something sweet and spicy like what frankincense must smell like. There was other stuff, and he heated it so it smoked, then worked it with those furry hands. After a while, he fetched out what he'd made. It was a big, rough candle, big around as your wrist, and as long to your arm, and as long as your arm to the elbow. Its wick looked like gray yarn, and the wax of it was dirty brown. Light it at midnight, he said, and carry it forward. It'll go out at the place where your wish is waiting for you. Understood? We said we understood. Then good day to you'uns, said Aram Harnham. None of us felt the need of sleep that night. At 11 o'clock by Mr. Hodge's big silver turnip watch, we started out to cross the ridge to Black Pine Hollow. Clay went ahead with a lantern. Reed Barnett followed with the candle. Then me with my guitar, strung on my back because I've mostly always carried it, and a grub and hoe in my hand. Then Mr. Hodge with a spade, and Mr. Eddy last of all with a crowbar. Sarah Ann watched us from the door till we got out of her sight. Not much of a trail led to Black Pine Hollow, for folks don't love to go there. Last night's hoot owls were right at it again, and once or twice we heard rattlings to the left and right like big things a-keeping pace with us among the bushes. Down into the hollow we went, while a breeze blew on us. Chill for that time of year. I thought, but didn't sing out loud. In the pines, where the sun never shines, and I shiver when the wind blows cold. Whereabouts is this mine? Asked Reed Barnett. I can find it better than Clay, called Mr. Hodge, and he pushed ahead and took the lantern. The light shone duller and duller, the way you'd think that moonless night was trying to smother it. Around us crowded the black pines the hollow was named for. Just to comfort myself, I tweaked a silver guitar string, and it rang so loud we all jumped. I think this must be it, said Mr. Hodge after a long, long while. He turned off through a thick bunch of the blackest-looking pines and held the lantern high. Hidden, there behind the trees, rose a rock face, like a wall. And in the rock was a raggy hole, the size of a door. Vines hung down all around it, but they looked dead and burnt out. As we stood still and looked, there was a little foot patter inside. Let's hope and pray it ain't a rat, said Clay. Rats in a mine is plumb bad luck. Shoo, said his daddy. Let's hope it ain't none worse than a rat. I'm going in, said Reed Barnett through his tight teeth. And I sure God don't want to go in alone. We went in together. Gentlemen. It was so black in that mine, you'd think a chunk of coal would show white. Maybe the lantern was smoking, It made just a little puddle of dim glow for us. Reed Barnett struck a match on his pants and set it to the yarning wick of that $500 candle. It blazed up clean and strong as the very light Reed Barnett had made in the middle of the star when he cast the spell. We saw where we were. Seemed as if there'd been a long hallway cut into the dark brown rock, but pieces had fallen down. They lay on top of one another before us, shutting us away from the hall. So we stood in a little space, not much bigger than Mr. Hodge's front room. To either side of the walls were of the dark brown stone, marked by the cutting tools those ancients had chopped their way through solid rock, and underfoot lay pebbles. Some were quartz, the way Mr. Hodge had said. All was quiet as the inside of a coffin the night before Judgment Day. "The flame's pointing," Reed Barnett called to us. It did point, like a burning finger, straight into the place. He stepped toward those rocks that piled into something like steps to go up, and we moved with him. I'll guarantee none of us wanted to go over the rocks and beyond. The blackness behind there made you feel not only nobody had ever been in there, but likewise, nobody ever could go. The blackness would shove him back like a hand. I moved behind Reed Barnett with the others. The light of the candle shone past his bulky body and wide hat, making him look like something cut out of black cloth. 2-3 steps, and he stopped so quick we almost bumped him. "The light flutters," he said. It did flutter. And now it didn't point to the piled rocks, but to the wall at their right. When Reed Barnett made a pace that direction, it winked out. We all stood close together in the dim lantern light. Reed Barnett put his hand on the rock wall. It showed ghosty white on the brown. His finger crawled along a seamy crack. "Dig there," he said to us. By what light the lantern showed, I shoved the pick of the grubbing hoe into the crack and gouged. Seemed the whole wall fought me, but I heaved hard and the crack widened. It made a heavy, spiteful noise somewhere. Mr. Eddy drove in the end of his bar and dragged down. "Come help me, Clay," he called. "Put your man on this here." The two pulled down with all their long, tall bodies, and then together they pushed up. My heart jumped inside me, for a piece of rock the size of a bed mattress was moving. I shoved on the hoe handle. Reed Barnett grabbed the free edge of the moving piece, and all of us laid into it, then jumped back just in time. The big, loose hunk dropped out like the lid of a box, and underneath was dark dirt. Mr. Eddy drove the crowbar point into it. Light that there candle thing again," he told Reed Barnett. Reed Barnett struck a match and tried. "Won't light." "We found the place," he said. "We got our hand right on it." I reckon that's the moment we all believed him. So far, we'd worried and bothered, but now we stopped that and worked. Clay took the spade from Mr. Hodge, and I swung my hoe. He scooped out the dirt I'd loosened. We breathed hard, watching or working. Suddenly, "John," said Clay, "didn't I hear that hoe blade hit metal?" I slammed it down into the dirt again, hard as I could. Clay scooped out a big spadeful, bright yellow, glimmered up out of the dark dirt. Clay grabbed into it, and so did his daddy. I had my mouth open to yell, but Reed Barnett yelled first. Caught in the bushes. Look up there. He had turned away from our work, and he was pointing up those step-piled rocks. On the top rock of them stood something against the choking blackness. It stood the height of a man, that thing, but you couldn't make sure of its shape, because it was strung and swaddled over with webby rags. They stirred and fluttered around it like gray smoke, and it had a hand, and the hand held a skull with white and grinning teeth and eyes that shone. It's an ancient, Reed Barnett yelled, and the thing growled deep and hungry and ugly. Clay dropped his spade. I heard the clank and jingle of metal pieces on the floor pebbles. He gave back, and Mr. Hodge and Mr. Eddy gave back with him. I stood where I was, putting down the hoe. Reed Barnett was the only one of us that moved forward. Stay clear of us, he sort of breathed out at the raggy gray thing. It pushed out the skull at him, and the skull's eyelights blinked and glared. Reed Barnett backed up. Let's get out of here before... He hadn't seen us find the treasure. His eyes had been on whatever the thing was. He was for running, but I wasn't. I'd faced peculiar things before. The ugly bird. One other. And I wouldn't run from that gray thing that held a skull like a lantern. So I shrugged my guitar in front of me. My left hand grabbed its neck, and my right spread on the silver strings, the silver that's sudden death to witch doings. I dragged a chord of music from them, and it echoed in there like a whole house full of guitar pickers helping me out. I thought the thing up there gave a shudder, and the skull it held wobbled to the side, maybe saying no to me. You don't like my music? I inquired it, and swept out another chord. Got my foot back on the bottom stepstone. Take care, John, came Reed Barnett's sick voice. Let that thing take care, I told him, and moved up on the rocks. It flung the skull at me. I dodged and felt the wind of the skull as it sailed grinning past, and I heard it smash to pieces like a bottle on the rocky floor behind me. For a second, that flinging hand stuck out of the gray rags. I knew whose hand it was, black, furry, like a spider. Aram Harnham, I hollered out, and let my guitar drop to swing by its cord, and I charged up those stairs of stones. Reed Barnett was after me as I got to the top. I grabbed both my legs full of rags just as Reed Barnett clamped onto my arm and dragged me back down, and where the rags had torn away, you could see Aram Harnham's face, all a thicket of hair and beard, with thin nose and shiny eyes. What's up? Mr. Eddy hooted. Aram Harnham's up, I yelled. He mortgaged your farms to sell us that candle thing and then came here to scare you, I pointed. And Reed Barnett's in with him. Reed Barnett had run up to the top stone and turned around beside Aram Harnham, his eyes big in his white face. I got my feet under me to charge back up at the two of them. But then I stopped where I was, the way you'd think roots had sprung out of my toes into the rock. There were three up there, not two. That third one looked at us, at first glimpse, like a big, big man wearing a dark fur coat. Then you saw the fur was on the skin, with with warty muscles bulging through. The head was more like a frog's than anything else, wide in the mouth and big in the eye, no nose. It spread its arms quiet-like around the shoulders of Reed Barnett and Aram Harnham, and took hold with the two hands that had both claws and webs. The two men it touched screamed out, like animals in a snap trap. They tried to pull free, but those two big, shaggy arms just hugged them close and hacked them from their feet. And what had come to fetch them away, it fetched them away. In a blink of time, back into the darkness no sensible soul would dare. That's when the other four of us up and flung down the lantern and tools and ran like rabbits. Back in Mr. Hodges, we lighted the lamp and looked at the two handfuls of metal pieces Clay and Mr. Eddy had grabbed and never turned loose. "I reckon they're money," said Mr. Hodge. "I ain't never seen such money as that." Nary one of us had. They weren't even round, just bumpy-edged and flattened out. You figured they'd been made by putting lumps of soft gold between the jaws of a die and then stamped out. The smallest was bigger and thicker than a 4-bit piece. They had figures on them, like men, with horned heads and snaky tails and what might be letters or numbers, only none of us could name what language it was. We put those coins into an old salt bag and sat up the rest of the night, not talking any great much, but pure down glad of one another's company. We had breakfast together, cooked by Sarah Ann, who had the good sense to not inquire us. After that, up came a young sheriff's deputy. "Howdy," he said to us. "Ever one of you seen a white fellow with a white face and a broad build?" "What's up with such a one?" asked Mr. Hodge. "They want him bad at the state prison," said the sheriff's deputy. "He was a showman doing play magic, but he took to swindling folks and got in jail and then got out again, and the law's been after him." "Well, we've seen such a man hereabouts," allowed Mr. Eddy. "But he's long gone from here now." When we were left alone again, we talked about how it was. Reed Barnett did his false tricks, like setting that pale light on the star and writing with invisible ink on the paper so it would show the words when it was heated. And he'd fixed for Aram Harnham to furnish us that candle, to get hold of the property of Mr. Hodge and Mr. Eddy, then scare 'em so bad they never dare look again and forfeit their home places. Only there was treasure there, and those two swindlers never guessed, and something had been left to watch and see it wasn't robbed away. I don't call to mind which one of us said we'd have to take the gold pieces back because they'd never do aught of good to honest folks. We went back at noon to Black Pine Hollow. The sun sure enough didn't shine, and we shivered with nary wind blowing. Inside the mine mouth, we found the lantern and lighted it. Clay had the nerve to pick up pieces of the broken skull Aram Harnham had flung, and we saw the eyes had shown. Pieces of tin in them. We found our spade and hoe and crowbar. Into the hole we flung the gold pieces on top of what seems a heap more lying down. Then we put back the dirt, tamped it down, and we all heaved and sweated till we'd set the piece of rock in place again. "The ancients got their treasure back," said Mr. Hodge, breathing heavily. Then, noise on those stepstones. I held up the lantern. Huddled and bent they stood up there, Reed Barnett and Aram Harnham, They sort of leaned together like tired-out horses in plow harness, not quite touching shoulders. Reed Barnett's white hands and Aram Harnham's shaggy ones hung with the fingers bent and limp. They looked down on us with sad eyes and mouths drooped open, the way you'd think they had some hope about us. No great much. "Look," said Clay beside me. "We've given back the gold." "They're giving back them two they dragged off last night." But they looked as if they'd been gone more than a night. The hair on Reed Barnett's hatless head was as white as his face. Aram Harnham's beard and the fur on his hands black no more, but a steamy gray. Maybe it had changed from fear, the way folks say can happen. Or maybe there had been time for it to change in that place where they'd been fetched to. "Go fetch him down, John," Mr. Hodge asked me. "We'll get a doctor for him when they get back to my house." I started up on the stones with the lantern. Their eyes picked up the lantern light and shone green, like dogs' eyes. One of them, I don't know which one, made a little whiny cry with no words to it. They ran from me into the dark, and I saw their backs bent more than I thought possible. I ran up to the top stone and held out the lantern. I saw them sort of fall forward and run on hands and feet, like animals. Not quite sure yet how to run that way on all fours, but something in me said, mighty positive, they'd learn better as time went by. I backed down again without watching anymore. "They won't come out," I said. Mr. Hodge scuffed his feet on the rock. "From what I've seen, I reckon it's as well. They'll stay here with the ancients." "The ancients are dead," spoke up Clay. "Way I reckon what's in there ain't no ancients, just some ancients left behind. I don't want no part of it." From Black Pine Hollow we went to Aram Harnham's empty cabin, and there we found the papers he tricked Mr. Hodge and Mr. Eddy to sign, and we burned them. On the way back, the two old men made it up betwixt them to spare to Clay and Sarah Ann a few acres from both home places. As to the cabin for the two, neighbors would be proud to help build it. "One thing wonders me," said Clay. "John, you never had ary notion night before last to sing about the girl with golden slippers on." "Not till I struck the strings and gave it out," I agreed with him. "Then how come Reed Barnett just happened to take him from under his coat for Sarah Ann?" Clay asked of us. "Stage show magic man or not, how'd he just come to do that by chance?" None of us could reply to him. Sarah Ann kept the golden slippers, and nobody could see a reason why not to. I sent on word I'd be late getting to Flournoy College and stayed around to help build the cabin. Sarah Ann wore the golden slippers at her wedding to Clay, and she danced in them with him, while I played song after song, Pretty Fair Maid, and Willie from the Western States, and I dreamt last night of my true love, all in my arms I had her. Preacher Crutchfield said the service, "What God hath joined together, let no man put asunder." And I kissed the pretty cheek bride, and so did many another kind friend, but the only man of us she sure enough kissed back was long, tall Clay Heron.